This story is based on true events. The names of characters and cities have been changed for confidentiality purposes. Alina Thompson was just 12 years old when she became an overnight sensation. Her rise to fame wasn't built on talent or hard work, but on a natural charisma and a knack for exploiting the viral landscape that so many of her peers were trying to navigate. In her small suburban neighborhood of Norman, Oklahoma, no one could have predicted that the shy, porcelain-skinned girl with platinum blonde hair and piercing blue eyes would become a name that echoed across the internet. To those who knew her, Alina seemed like just another typical tween, constantly on her phone, addicted to social media, her face always illuminated by the soft glow of the screen. But beneath the surface, Alina was different. She had a hunger that couldn't be satisfied with mere likes or shares. Her family was broken, fragmented in ways that no one could quite piece together. Her father, a truck driver, was rarely home. He spent days, sometimes weeks, away from the family, delivering goods across the country, leaving Alina to fend for herself. He wasn't a bad man, just absent, lost in the grind of a job that demanded everything from him but gave little in return. Alina's mother worked two jobs at a local diner, the other as a housekeeper for a wealthy family in town. When she was home, she was often tired, her face lined with exhaustion, her hands rough from constant labor. Their relationship was distant, not born of malice but neglect, as both parents were too occupied with their own struggles to notice the way Alina was slipping into something darker. In the physical absence of her parents, Alina had turned to the digital world. It was an escape, a place where she could become whoever she wanted to be, someone confident, someone powerful. She had always been a chameleon in real life, switching between personalities depending on the people she was with. But on TikTok, she was herself, or rather, she was the version of herself she wanted to be. She had an uncanny ability to craft her image, to curate her personality in a way that captivated others. Her followers grew steadily, initially from her charming dance videos, goofy challenges, and harmless pranks. They loved her energy, the way she could light up a room, the confidence she exuded. But as time passed, something began to shift within her. The attention wasn't enough anymore. The comments weren't enough. She craved something more. Alina wanted to be remembered, not just as a cute girl who made funny videos, but as someone whose name people couldn't forget. It wasn't long before the harmless pranks and lip-sync videos started to give way to more daring content. At first, it was subtle, a prank involving a fake injury or a staged argument with her mother. The views surged, the comments flooded in, and Alina felt a rush. She was in control of something. For the first time, she felt powerful. That brief moment of validation was intoxicating, and she knew she had to push further. She started searching for new ways to escalate her content. The lighthearted challenges seemed trivial now. She wanted something that would shock, something that would make the entire internet stop and take notice. She wanted to break the internet, not with a smile, but with something far darker. Her obsession with getting views became all-consuming. Every waking moment was spent studying the algorithms, analyzing the most popular videos, trying to understand what made people click, what made them share, what made them watch until the very end. She learned quickly that the things that captured attention weren't just funny or clever. They were intense, controversial, and sometimes even shocking. Alina understood this. She saw the viral success of others who had pushed boundaries and crossed lines. She watched as people gained millions of followers overnight, not because they were exceptionally talented, but because they were unpredictable, dangerous, and daring. The idea of fame true femino longer seemed like something that could be achieved through harmless antics. It needed to be bigger, bolder, something that would make people talk. The more she studied, the more she realized that people were drawn to the spectacle, the chaos. But what truly captivated them, what made them stay glued to the screen, was fear. Fear made people react. Fear made people stay. Fear was the ultimate tool for gaining followers, for turning heads. Alina's home life did little to ground her. She had become used to the isolation, to the quiet emptiness of a house that was often abandoned by the very people she longed to connect with. She spent hours in her room, bathed in the glow of her phone screen, creating content, reading comments, and scrolling through endless feeds of people living lives she couldn't even imagine. Her parents remained distant, caught up in their own struggles, too tired to notice that their daughter was sinking into a dangerous obsession. Even when they were home, the house felt hollow, like a stage that no one was truly present to perform on. Alina found no comfort in the idea of family. She didn't need them. Not anymore. Not when she could craft a life online that was better, more exciting, more fulfilling. Her online persona became her everything. The sweet, innocent face that her neighbors saw when they passed by the house was a far cry from the girl behind the screen. No one knew how deep Alina's need for validation ran. No one saw how far she was willing to go to keep the likes and comments flowing. She was no longer satisfied with the simple adoration of her followers. She wanted something bigger, something that would force the world to stop and look at her. She wanted to create an experience that would transcend everything she had done before spectacle, a moment so unforgettable that it would become part of the cultural lexicon. She would become a legend, a name spoken with reverence and fear. As the days passed, Alina grew more and more obsessed with this idea, this vision of fame. She would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, imagining herself in the headlines, her face plastered on every news outlet, her name synonymous with shock and awe. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that this was her destiny, that the path to her true greatness lay in doing something that no one else would dare to do. Something that would change everything. She wasn't just another TikTok star. She was meant to be a force. And like all forces, she needed to be unleashed. The world, she believed, was ready for her. And she was ready for it. But it wasn't enough to simply be liked or shared. She knew that to truly make an impact, to truly become unforgettable, she would have to do something radical. Something no one could ever ignore. Something that would get her the kind of attention she desired, attention that went beyond views, beyond comments, beyond anything she had ever experienced. She was no longer interested in being a star in a crowd. She was determined to become the only thing people would ever remember. In the midst of her quest for fame, something inside her clicked. It wasn't just about getting likes or followers anymore. It was about making her name synonymous with something powerful, something that would resonate forever. The more Alina thought about it, the clearer it became. The world didn't just need a new viral sensation, it needed something horrifying, something that would haunt people. She would give them that. She would give them the content of nightmares. And in doing so, she would become more than just a TikTok star. She would become an icon. Alina sat alone in her room late that night, the glow from her phone screen illuminating her face in a ghostly light. Outside, the usual hum of the quiet Oklahoma neighborhood was interrupted only by the occasional car passing by. But to her, it might as well have been a distant world. She had long since tuned out everything that existed beyond the confines of her bedroom walls. Her fingers moved almost mechanically as she scrolled through her TikTok feed, watching video after video, her eyes locked on the thumbnails, searching for something that would capture her attention. Something new, something bold. The usual content was their dance challenges, lip syncs, funny pranks, but it all felt too safe, too predictable. Alina didn't want to be just another content creator. She wanted to be the one people would remember. She needed more, much more. She was already popular, but the likes, comments, and shares weren't enough anymore. She had accumulated thousands of followers over the past year, each video a little more daring than the last. Yet with every new stunt, every new joke, the same thought kept eating at her, gnawing at her from the inside. It's still not enough. It's still not the kind of fame I want. The desire for validation, for recognition, had become an obsession. Her videos were being shared, yes, but they were starting to blend into the sea of content. In the vast ocean of viral stars and influencers, Alina felt like a speck, fading into obscurity despite the number of views and followers. If she wanted to truly stand out, to become unforgettable, she realized She needed to do something that would shock the world, something so extreme that no one could ignore her. As her thumb flicked through the videos, she paused on one that caught her eye, a clip of a viral prank gone wrong. A young man had pretended to steal an old lady's purse, only for things to spiral when the woman fought back, hitting him with her handbag and causing a scene. The video had gone viral, not because of the original prank, but because of the chaos that followed. People loved the spectacle. They loved the unexpected turn, the intensity of the reaction, and most importantly, the realness of it. It wasn't scripted or staged. It was raw. It was real. That's when the idea came to her. What if she did something even bigger? Something that wasn't just a prank, but a truly unforgettable moment. Something that no one could look away from. Alina felt a chill run down her spine, not out of fear, but out of excitement. The thought was a spark that set her mind on fire. She realized that what the world craved wasn't just entertainment, it was spectacle. Real fear, real drama. She wasn't interested in the typical viral pranks anymore. Those were too predictable, too safe. No, she needed something shocking, something that would get the kind of attention that made headlines, that would keep people glued to their screens for days. Her mind raced as she imagined it. The more she thought about it, the clearer it became. She would do something dangerous, something so extreme, so unpredictable, that it would not only shatter the internet, but send her name coursing through every social media platform. She didn't just want to go viral. She wanted to redefine what it meant to go viral. People would talk about her for years. She'd be remembered, feared, and adored. Her face would be on every news outlet, every trending page, and it would all start with one simple act. Alina's heart pounded in her chest as she plotted the details in her head. She'd always prided herself on being clever, on being able to manipulate situations, to create chaos that appeared spontaneous, yet was carefully orchestrated. But this time, it wouldn't be a simple trick. This time, it would be real. She would need to be careful, meticulous. She would have to plan everything, right down to the smallest detail. It would be risky, dangerous, even, but that was the point. It was the risk that would make it extraordinary. She turned away from her phone, her mind still racing as the idea began to take form. She needed to think about the logistics. The what-ifs flooded her thoughts. What if it didn't go as planned? What if the police showed up? What if someone tried to stop her? But those thoughts didn't matter. This was her chance. She couldn't let fear stop her, not when the world was within reach. Alina's room was quiet, except for the steady hum of her fan, but in her mind, the noise of her planning filled the space. She thought about the people around her neighbors, the ones who lived just streets away. They were all so ordinary, so predictable. It would be easy to manipulate them, to make them part of the story she was about to create. She had lived in this neighborhood long enough to know the rhythms of their lives, the little details that would make her plan work. The Davises, the Johnsons, the Parkers, they were all perfect for her experiment. They had families, children, routines. They had patterns that could be disrupted. They were the perfect targets. The more she thought about it, the more the plan seemed perfect. She could use her TikTok account to document it all, to make sure the footage went viral. A live stream, perhaps? That would be perfect, a real-time, unfiltered look at the chaos she was about to unleash. Her followers would watch as the whole thing unfolded before their eyes, unable to look away. They would witness the spectacle, and through it, they would become part of her story. The viewers would be complicit, but it wouldn't matter. She'd be the one in control. She'd be the one shaping the narrative. Alina's heart raced with anticipation. She could already picture the headlines, the endless stream of comments, the flood of new followers. She would be untouchable. The fear she would create would transcend the video. She would leave a mark on the world that no one could forget. This would be her legacy. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a car pulling into the driveway, the headlights casting long shadows against the walls of her room. Her parents had come home. They didn't notice her as she quickly snapped her phone shut, her heart still pounding in her chest. They didn't understand, couldn't understand the depths of her desire for recognition. To them, she was just another kid lost in the digital world. But Alina knew the truth. She was different. She was capable of something far greater. She was capable of making her name known, of carving out a place for herself in the history of viral content. As she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, her mind raced. She had made the decision. She had chosen the path, and nothing would stop her now. What she was about to do would forever change the way people viewed viral fame. It would be a new chapter, one that no one could anticipate, and one that Alina would own entirely. She closed her eyes, a smile creeping across her lips. Tomorrow, she would begin. For the next several days, Alina moved through the world with a strange sense of purpose. Every moment, every interaction, became part of her grand plan. Her parents continued their routine. Father spent most of his time on the road, his truck parked in the driveway only when he needed to sleep, while her mother worked long shifts, coming home only to sleep and eat before heading back out again. They were both absent in the way that only people consumed by their own lives could be, and Alina welcomed their absence. It gave her the freedom to prepare without interference, to slip in and out of the house unnoticed. In fact, the only time her mother truly acknowledged her existence was when Alina needed something. A quick trip to the store, a bit of extra cash, anything to keep her on track. The first thing Alina did was start small, unnoticed. A quiet trip to the local store, hidden away in the shadows of a mundane errand. She had learned early on to disguise her intentions, to wear a mask of normalcy while her true motivations bubbled beneath the surface. No one suspected the sweet little girl with the bright smile, who knew how to charm even the most cynical store clerk. She'd go in, buy snacks, and then casually pick up the items she needed for her plan. It started with small things: tape, rope, plastic bags, gloves. Nothing that seemed out of place for a girl her age. A few people noticed her walking out of the aisles with these items, but no one stopped her. No one questioned her. In fact, no one even looked twice. She was just another customer. As she continued her preparations, Alina grew more precise in her choices. She'd learned from the videos, the crime documentaries, and the shocking pranks that she'd seen online. She took notes, mentally rehearsing every detail, every angle, every possible outcome. Every night, she would review her plan, making sure there were no holes, no moments where she might falter. She needed everything to be flawless. The idea of failure was unimaginable. When she had all the supplies she thought she would need, she started gathering information. She had been observing her neighbors for weeks, noting their routines, their movements, the times when they were most vulnerable. It wasn't difficult. The neighborhood was quiet, and people were predictable. She knew who came and went, who worked late shifts, who took the kids to school, and who stayed home all day. The Johnsons next door were an easy target. They had a young child, and the mother worked long hours at a local boutique. The Parkers, across the street, were another choice, an elderly couple who spent most of their time in the house. They were always in at the same time every evening, watching television or reading, never suspecting that they were being watched. Alina knew them all, and she knew how to get into their houses without raising suspicion. Each day, she grew more focused. She started to weave her movements with precision, sneaking out to scope out new locations, checking the layout of the houses, and making sure there were no obstacles. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications, but she paid no attention to the fleeting comments or messages. She wasn't in it for the instant gratification of likes anymore. She was building something, far bigger something, that would reverberate beyond the boundaries of her small neighborhood. She started testing her equipment. She would set up her camera in her room, running through mock scenarios, practicing her timing. She practiced staying still for long periods, perfecting her ability to sneak around without making a sound. She positioned her phone in different corners of the room, making sure she could film everything without it being obvious. The setup was key. The more angles she could capture, the better the end result would be. She knew that this wasn't just about shock value, it was about immersion. She wanted her audience to feel every moment, to be drawn into the terror unfolding on their screens. Alina began to take more risks. She set up cameras in the empty houses next door, sneaking into the homes of her neighbors while they were out. It was easy to get in. No one ever thought to lock their doors. The houses were all unlocked, and the sound of the wind rustling through the trees outside was the only noise she could hear as she placed her devices in corners, on shelves, under beds. The footage was crisp, high quality, perfect for what she needed. She checked the cameras every day, making sure they were functioning correctly, adjusting their positions when necessary. She learned how to move through the houses without leaving a trace, how to blend into the shadows, a ghost in the corner of the frame. She even started testing out the live stream feature on TikTok, making sure everything would be seamless. It was crucial that nothing interrupted the flow of the video. She was meticulous, adjusting the lighting, checking the audio, ensuring that everything was just right. There were no second chances. Her heart would pound as she sat in front of the screen, watching her practice runs, analyzing every small detail. The intensity of her focus grew with each passing day, and as the live stream practice sessions turned into a more refined routine, she started to feel a sense of control she had never known before. She was crafting a narrative, manipulating her audience, pulling them deeper into her web. But as the days went on, Alina began to realize that her plans were more complicated than she had initially thought. The deeper she sank into her preparations, the more aware she became of the stakes. The risk of getting caught, the possibility of the police showing up, the thought of people discovering what she was planning it, all loomed in the back of her mind. But it didn't stop her. Instead, it heightened her sense of urgency. The world she had created, one of online fame and fleeting attention, felt empty. She had to leave a mark, something that no one would be able to erase, something so dark and spectacular that it would stay etched in the minds of millions forever. Her fear became fuel, and her focus became sharper. She stopped seeing her neighbors as real people and began to view them as pawns in her game, tools that would allow her to complete the masterpiece she had been building in her mind. The people she had once smiled at in passing, who she had waved at, joked with, and observed from behind the screen were now nothing more than part of her plan. In the quiet moments before sleep, Alina would lie in bed, her mind replaying the details over and over. She visualized herself in the middle of it all, the cameras rolling, the world watching, her name echoing through social media. The end result would be worth everything. In the final days of preparation, Alina felt like she was slipping into a different version of herself, a self that existed only within the confines of her plan. The girl who once cared about the likes and shares had become something else. She was detached, focused solely on the objective, willing to do whatever it took to make it happen. The boundaries between what was real and what was virtual began to blur. On the night before she would finally put her plan into motion, Alina stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. She didn't recognize herself. She hadn't for some time now. What she saw wasn't a 12-year-old girl with big blue eyes and a smile that could light up a room. What she saw was a predator, a person with a single goal: to break the internet, to take everything that she had learned from this world of viral content, and to make her name unforgettable. The world was about to change. She could feel it in her bones. Everything was in place. She was ready. The night had fallen heavy and suffocating, wrapping the small neighborhood of Norman, Oklahoma, in a veil of eerie calm. Alina stood at the window of her bedroom, her pale face reflecting the streetlights as they flickered across the cracked pavement outside. The moon hung low, casting long shadows over the rows of houses that lined the suburban streets. It was a typical night, the kind that held no promise, no excitement. Yet, for Alina, it felt electric, charged with the anticipation of what was about to unfold. For weeks, she had been preparing for this night. Every moment leading up to it had been meticulously planned. She had spent countless hours watching videos, reading up on her neighbors' routines, learning their weaknesses, studying their lives as if they were characters in a twisted game she was about to control. Alina's obsession had escalated beyond anything she could have anticipated, but it didn't matter anymore. She was no longer a 12-year-old girl hiding behind a screen, seeking validation. She was something different, Now something more dangerous, something more powerful. She had crossed the line, and there was no going back. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the mask on her face, the black cloth covering everything except her eyes. She had chosen it carefully, a mask that would make her look like a faceless phantom, something devoid of identity. It was important to her that, in the eyes of the world, she wasn't just a girl. She wasn't Alina Thompson. She was the anonymous force that would haunt them. This was her moment, the point of no return. She was both terrified and exhilarated by the idea of what was about to happen. A small, twisted smile crept onto her lips, and for a brief second, she felt like she was on top of the world. The plan had been simple, at least on paper. She would move through the neighborhood like a shadow, striking when the time was right. There was no room for mistakes, no space for hesitation. Every house had been carefully chosen. She knew the families, their routines, their habits. She had watched them from her bedroom window, silently observing as they went about their lives. The Davises, the Parkers, the Johnsons, all of them had lives that she had mapped out, their patterns ingrained in her mind. The people she had chosen were all weak in some way. They trusted too easily, lived too predictably. That would be their downfall. Tonight, Alina had set everything up. She had spread out across the neighborhood, dropping cameras in key locations. A small camera wedged behind a flower pot on the Parkers' porch, another hidden in the bushes near the Johnsons' front door. She had even gone as far as tampering with the lights, ensuring they would flicker at just the right moment. She didn't need to be in the houses to film. Her plan was to watch from the outside, to orchestrate the chaos from the shadows. Her TikTok account had already been prepared, set to go live the moment she began her work. She wasn't sure what exactly she expected from the live stream, but she knew one thing: people would watch. They would be captivated, horrified, and above all, they would never forget what they were about to witness. She took one last look around her room, making sure everything was in place: the phone, the gloves, the small pack of tools she had brought along. The night was her canvas, and the tools were her brush. The world would soon see the masterpiece she was about to create. She glanced at her phone, where the app was already open, waiting. The timer was set. She tapped the button that began the stream, her heart racing in her chest as the camera clicked on. Her phone's front-facing camera blinked on, showing her masked face, and then the dark void of her room behind her. Her followers, hundreds of them, would soon join. They didn't know what was coming, but Alina did. The first house she approached was the Davises' house, located just 2 doors down. The Davises had always been an easy target. The father, Chad, was a career man who worked late, leaving his wife Rachel and their 2 children to sleep undisturbed. Alina had already mapped their movements. The father would be gone, the mother would be in bed, and the kids were often left in their rooms, wrapped up in their own worlds. It was perfect. Alina knew this house inside and out. She'd already disabled the security cameras, leaving the family completely unaware that anything was amiss. As she approached the house, the sound of her footsteps on the gravel driveway was muffled by the thick silence of the night. Her breath was shallow, her movements careful, as she crouched near the front door, using her phone to check the live stream's comments. It was already buzzing with excitement, comments flooding the screen with messages like, "What's going on?" and "Is this real?" She didn't respond. There was no time for that. With a deep breath, she slipped a hand into her pocket and pulled out the small black device she had used to disable the cameras. She pressed it against the doorframe, ensuring the signal was cut off completely. No one would see her enter. Alina's heart thudded in her chest as she turned the door handle. It creaked softly, the sound carrying into the empty house. She pushed the door open, slipping inside with the ease of someone who had practiced this 100 times before. The air inside was cool, too quiet. She let the darkness consume her as she made her way through the hallway. Every step was calculated, every movement deliberate. She was a predator now, and the neighborhood was her prey. The live stream captured everything. The faint light from her phone, casting long shadows on the walls as she moved forward, her mask now the only thing visible to the cameras. The first room she reached was the kitchen. She paused by the counter, watching the clock. The time was ticking down. Alina knew she had only minutes before the family would realize something was wrong, but by then, it would be too late. She set her phone down on the counter. The camera angled at her as she surveyed the space. The kitchen was empty. Rachel was already upstairs, asleep. The kids were in their rooms. She moved with a quickness, crossing the room toward the stairs. The house was quiet, except for the distant hum of the refrigerator. It felt almost too quiet. Alina knew what came next. She had prepared for this moment. She had rehearsed it, visualized it, felt it in her bones. This would be the turning point, the moment everything changed. She made her way up the stairs, each step silent. The house seemed to hold its breath, as if even it knew something terrible was about to happen. As she reached the top of the stairs, she paused outside the master bedroom. Alina's hand rested on the door handle, her fingers cold from the anticipation. She glanced down at her phone, checking the live stream. The comments were racing faster now, a wave of excitement mixed with dread. Her thumb hovered over the screen, but it was time. She pushed the door open, stepping into the darkened room. Inside, Rachel Davis lay sleeping, her breathing steady, unaware that her life was about to end. With a single, deliberate motion, Alina moved closer. The first strike was quick, efficient. Rachel's eyes opened just in time to see the mask, the dark figure looming over her, before everything went black. The camera kept recording. The live stream continued, and Alina, her heart still racing, stepped back into the hallway, already moving toward her next victim. The morning after the horror, the world awoke to a chilling silence, one that had been shattered in an instant by a single, horrific act that seemed unimaginable even in the depths of the darkest corners of the internet. Alina's face, or rather, the faceless mask that had been the only identifying feature, was all over the news, the videos plastered across social media like a virulent plague. What had once been a quiet, peaceful neighborhood in Norman, Oklahoma, had now become the epicenter of a catastrophe so grotesque, so unimaginable, that it was almost impossible for the human mind to reconcile the image of the smiling, innocent young girl from the live stream with the brutal acts of violence that followed. The live stream had been a carnal shockwave. Alina had known it would be shocking, but she never fully anticipated the scale of what she had set in motion. As soon as the first house was breached, and the dark, faceless figure moved through the rooms like a ghost, viewers had been drawn into the chaos. There had been no warning, no build-up, just pure, raw terror. As Rachel Davis had screamed, and as the mask-wearing figure moved further into the house, something irreversible had been unleashed. The viewers had been riveted, unable to look away, driven by a dark compulsion to witness what was happening in real time, as if they too had become participants in the nightmare unfolding before their eyes. But when the final scream had echoed through the camera, when the blood had spilled across the floor, and the sounds of terror had filled the air, it was no longer just a video. It had become a reality. The massacre had happened, and the internet would never be the same again. The first report had come through Twitter, a brief tweet from a local news outlet. Breaking: multiple deaths in suburban Oklahoma home. Live footage shows disturbing events unfold. Authorities investigating. In the hours that followed, the floodgates opened. The clip had spread like wildfire, seizing attention like nothing else before it. Alina had been on the internet long enough to know how viral content spread, but even she hadn't prepared for the monstrous virality of her own creation. Within minutes, the footage had been shared across every platform imaginable. Twitter exploded with a mix of disbelief, outrage, and morbid curiosity. On Reddit, discussions began under the thread number Oklahoma Massacre, as users dissected every frame, trying to decipher the face behind the mask, or to understand what could have motivated such an unfathomable act. The hashtag number Alina Thompson trended worldwide. On Facebook, the videos had been shared millions of times. While people's comments flooded in, some shocked into silence, others unable to resist the primal urge to express their horror and fascination. As the night turned to morning, news outlets had picked up the story, their anchors reporting with shaking voices, their hands gripping the edges of the desks. The gruesome details were shared relentlessly, the images of blood and death circulating faster than the authorities could contain them. Social media began buzzing with accusations, speculations, and unrestrained opinions. It wasn't long before the authorities were scrambling to identify the figure behind the mask. The FBI and local law enforcement had launched a full-scale investigation, but the damage was already done. Alina's face, or rather the mask she wore, was now seared into the minds of millions. Across the country, people were glued to their screens. This wasn't just another viral video, it was something that crossed every boundary of decency, something that had bypassed morality entirely. It wasn't long before a live stream of the events began circulating on platforms like YouTube and Instagram, with millions of views within the first few hours. The entire world watched as Alina, now a name synonymous with brutality, continued her spree of destruction, moving through neighborhood after neighborhood. The authorities couldn't stop it. They were too far behind, too disoriented, and by the time they had reached the houses, Alina was already gone. The world's reaction was an unsettling mix of repulsion and allure. There were cries for justice, for punishment, for understanding of what had caused this young girl, this seemingly innocent child, to snap in such a horrific way. But there was also something darker at play. A certain faction of people, many of them young, impressionable viewers, found themselves entranced by the violence. They saw the killings as an act of rebellion, a break from the monotony of their own lives, an act of control in a world where they often felt powerless. In a twisted way, Alina had become an idol to some, a symbol of how far one could go to be seen, to be heard. But not everyone saw it that way. There were those who called for her immediate arrest, who called her a monster, a living nightmare that needed to be contained. Those who had watched in horror, who had seen the brutality unfold live, now struggled with a deep sense of guilt, wondering if they too were complicit in the violence simply by watching, by giving her the attention she so desperately sought. The internet had played a role in this, creating a space where the grotesque could thrive, where a young girl could gain global fame by committing a massacre. The guilt of those who had watched from behind the safety of their screens gnawed at them. The moral implications of that guilt spread like a disease. Meanwhile, Alina's followers had continued to grow. Though many had unfollowed her, horrified by what they had seen, there were still thousands, if not millions, who remained. They were fascinated, obsessed even, by her. The dark allure of her image, of the anonymity she had crafted through the mask, drew them in. To them, Alina wasn't just a murderer, she was an enigma, a figure beyond understanding, someone who had transcended the usual bounds of online fame. She had given them the most extreme form of entertainment imaginable, something so shocking that it almost seemed unreal. And in their minds, this made her even more powerful. Alina had turned her name into a brand, but what a brand it was. News outlets continued to churn out stories, breaking down every aspect of her life. Journalists dug into her past, attempting to paint a picture of the girl who had killed 11 people for nothing more than clicks and views. They reported on her family, her isolation, her obsession with social media. They speculated on the pressures of fame, on the unspoken dangers of a world where social media stars were treated as gods. But nothing could explain the horror fully. What had driven Alina to kill? Was it just the thirst for fame? Or was there something more sinister at work? Psychologists weighed in, offering theories that ranged from the impact of social media on young minds to the possibility of a deep-seated mental illness that had finally tipped her over the edge. But none of the theories seemed to fully capture the magnitude of what she had done. Amid the growing panic, the authorities were closing in on Alina. They had traced her IP address, they had identified the phone used to stream the live broadcast, and they had located the places where she had dropped off the cameras. But Alina was always one step ahead. She had vanished into the night, leaving only the wreckage behind. The livestream, though, continued to haunt the world. It was still out there, circulating among the darkest corners of the internet, a reminder of what had happened. The aftermath was a world that could never be the same again. People couldn't forget the brutal image of Alina's mask, her calm and calculated movements as she carried out the killings. Her name, once associated with innocent content on TikTok, was now tied forever to something far darker. She had achieved what so many could only dream of immortality, but it had come at a cost that no one could have predicted. The internet had given her everything she had ever wanted, but in return, it had taken her soul. In the end, Alina Thompson was not just a murderer. She was a symbol of something far greater, the consequences of a world obsessed with attention, with fame, and with the grotesque. The world would never forget her.